and we'll go ahead and start recording on Zoom as well.
Great. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the Board of Trustees Budget Committee to order. It is now 3:06. Let the record show that Trustee Wilkerson and Trustee Cervantes, the two members of the committee, are present. That constitutes our roll call. Commissioner Wilkerson, do you have any amendments or changes to the agenda?
No, I do not.
No?
Did you call me Commissioner Wilkerson?
I saw you Commissioner Trustee. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was like, oh.
I was actually going to call you. I was going to call you Mayor, but I thought that would be too.
I'll take that too.
There you go. Okay. And do we have any public comments or a request to speak, Diego?
We do not. We don't have any on our public site and our email.
Okay. And Nikki, do we need to actually have a vote for adoption of the agenda? Is that necessary?
I don't know, Nicole, what usually happens with two? It's hard to remember.
I don't really think we need to, but.
We haven't done that in the past.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't think it's necessary, but okay. So then with that, we have the consent calendar, which consists of the approval of the minutes. Camila, did you have any changes to the minutes?
I do not.
From the February 11th meeting? No? Okay. With that then, can I get a motion, I guess it would be, to approve that? The consent calendar?
Means me, right?
Yeah, so it's just kind of weird, but.
So moved.
All right, and I second it. So the consent calendar, which consists of the minutes from the February 11th meeting, is approved. There's no unfinished business, so that takes us to item number 5, which is the new business. Nikki, I'll turn it over to you for Roman numeral 5A, review and approval of the committee's recommendations on the adopted budget for fiscal year 21-22.
And I'll just pass it right over to Nicole.
That was easy.
Thank you. So I'm just going to kind of go through the overall budget and kind of read through my stock report, just kind of go line by line for you guys. So let's see. Can I share my screen, please, Diego?
You should be able to go do it now.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, can everybody see that? Do I need to zoom in at all to make it bigger?
I can see it fine. Thank you.
Okay,
I see it fine also.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this is the draft budget that we've prepared with iBailey. So Ian helped me out a lot on this, and I'm going to let him speak a little bit to things like property taxes. We also added this additional column for CFD related income and expenses. So we'll talk a little about that. But basically, I'm just going to go through my report, which goes through it line by line. So for revenues, this is a new kind of line for us, this use or addition to reserves. Actually, it's not a new line. The next one is new. This use addition of reserves is kind of either what we intend to pull from reserves or what we intend to add to reserves, depending on ending cash and how much we plan to either receive in revenue and spend for this year. So we'll talk a little bit more about that once we get to the end of the budget. This transfer in from other funds is what we are anticipating spending, as you can see there on CFD expenses so far. You'll see that same number reflected in the operating budget and in the proposed CFD budget. These are expenses that we expect will be reimbursed from bond proceeds at that point in time.
Yeah, Nicole, if I could just say something on that line, you'll basically see the transfer out at the bottom of the budget and then the transfer in at the top, and it almost, cross collateralizes each other. So it's really just an in and out showing because we are fronting some of the costs for the CFD. Mm-hmm. So really just showing the reimbursement, like Nicole said.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So then we move on to donations and grants. So we did reach out to the foundation and to the Friends. So those are the numbers that they have committed for this upcoming fiscal year. You know, unfortunately, the Friends are not able to host any major book sales, which are their major drivers of income. So they unfortunately have had to contribute a little bit less for this fiscal year. Currently, no designated funds for next fiscal year. Those are grants and things that we apply for that have a specific purpose. We do have a ton of them this year at the very end of this fiscal year, but so far nothing for next year.
Nicole?
Yes.
Sorry, I mean, actually, so for Camila and myself, so as we're going through your presentation, it'd be helpful maybe as we jump in and we have questions rather than going back to the beginning of the document with our questions. So with the donations and grants, obviously, with a huge grant of the $346,000 for IT, it was great, but then the way it works, it makes it look like the overall revenue is down significantly on a percentage basis. And we were talking at one point, is there a different way to represent that? Because, maybe I know that that'll show negatively. Is there a different way to reflect that, or are we just kind of stuck showing it that way and just with a footnote to the reader? Because anytime you do an annual budget, you're going to have to show a net increase, decrease in your revenue as well as your expenses, so it'll reflect rather negatively. So what are your thoughts to that?
I'm going to let Ian take that one.
There's a couple ways we can handle that. We can address that in the narrative, which I'm not sure if you did, Nicole. So if those were designated funds for IT upgrades, it sounds like, then those I would imagine would be reflected in expense, and we'd probably see a reduction in expense on one of the lines below. If those are budgeted in 2021, when is it that you're planning to use those?
The funds have already been spent. That $340,000 for internet upgrades, so they've already been accounted to capital expenditures. Capital expenditures, okay. Then if that's the case, I might rework this budget to maybe exclude those designated funds from this line, just in particular, and then maybe wrap them up into the capital budget, since I think we adjusted the capital budget for those IT expenses, correct? We did. We increased it. Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's down line 144, maybe structures and improvements. So maybe we make that a net line showing what are the reserves, because really what we're trying to reflect is a use of reserves in this budget. So maybe we update that line to show the net on the structures and improvements, where the IT expenditures were net of designated grant proceeds. So that way we won't see such a huge variance, Trustee Cervantes.
I think that makes sense.
And in future, we do intend to separate out any capital improvements to separate from the operating fund, so that it doesn't create that huge discrepancy.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that, Nicole.
Sure.
Okay, I'll note that update.
Okay, let's see. And then line 9, the California Library Literacy Services, that is the final number that we've received from that agency. So that is what we will be receiving for the upcoming fiscal year. Oh my goodness, bless you. I'm here with Chloe. So then we move on to fines and fees. And so we've increased almost all of these accounts in anticipating a further reopening and further business being done inside the library, especially passport services. Since they reopened just a couple months ago, they've been incredibly busy. So we're anticipating them to be able to make what they usually make, maybe just a little bit less with the social.
Nicole, on that line, the passport, I think that's great. And, we've received Nikki's reports on the robust passport program recently. But my question is that the staff that are doing this, is that their full-time job to just do passports?
We have one and one part-time staff person that are exclusively passport services.
Okay, so these aren't traditional librarian employees that now, because they're doing so much work in the passport area that their services are being taken away from other parts of library operations. They're exclusively for there to process passports, right?
They are classed as a library assistant and as a library clerk, so they are capable of doing library work, but they are exclusive to passports.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so let's see. Then we have interest income for the County of LA. And this is just based on the income that we receive, right? That's been a more moderate increase since interest rates are lower than they have been. And then for other revenue, we have film rental revenue, which has been trending quite well for us the last few months. We've had many inquiries for renting either our parking lot or a small portion of library space. So we do anticipate greater income for that account. E-rate revenue is figured by an E-rate consultant that we have and our IT manager, Christopher. So that's how much we anticipate getting in revenue for that. It does decrease every year. There's less funding available for that account. And then credit card rebates, there's maybe half the staff that have credit cards. So we encourage the use of that because we do get statement credits for using credit cards. And then I'm gonna let Ian speak to property taxes if he doesn't mind.
Sure, thank you, Nicole. Just based on the property taxes here, we're taking basically our 2021 assessments, and we're going to add a 2% increase for property value, since that is the max that they can go up, or actually that the property taxes can go up. So we're budgeting just with a 2% increase to really what we received in 2021.
Makes sense.
Yeah, pretty basic there. Just a conservative budget.
Okay, so any questions about what we've budgeted for revenues before we move on to expenses?
Camila, anything? Nope. Okay.
No, I do
We're
not.
good. Thank you, Camila.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to salaries and benefits. So for the salaried and hourly accounts, we show an increase of 5% and 13% respectively. These figures include a 2% COLA for all staff, as well as anticipated adjustments to pay based on an updated classification and compensation assessment for 2 management level positions. It also includes the addition of a full-time benefited library assistant to support mobile library unit service and the ability to have open hours on Sundays.
So this open on Sunday, as well as the additional staff person, is the increase of the hourly, essentially, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And at one time, we were discussing the potential of dedicated staff for the van. Is that included in this or not?
So we do have a librarian position that we just created, the innovations librarian, and about 50% of that position is exclusive to mobile library service. And then this library assistant full-time that we would like to hire would also support the mobile library unit service.
Okay, and is that additional position has already been approved? And this is just the funding for it, or is this something that we're approving through this budgetary process for next fiscal year?
Yeah, it would be approved through the budgetary process. So the library assistant classification is approved and everything. We're just asking for the additional funding to hire on that person.
So the position's already been approved?
The class of library assistant, yes.
No, the position authority. I mean, there's a position of classification and there's position authority. You were adding additional person. My question is, has the board already approved the addition of this new position? Because you can have 5 librarian positions if the classification is librarian, but if you're adding a 6th, then my question is that 6th librarian has that been approved? That's my question.
I see. So the district director actually has authority over hiring and things like that. We just need the approval for the budgetary expense.
Got it. Okay, good to know. I did not know that. New kid on the block question.
And to add to that, Rushmore, we did have a vacancy recently. Today was actually that person's last day, and it was part-time. So we're planning to upgrade that position to a full-time position to help support, like Nicole said, the mobile library unit, and potentially having open hours on Sunday. So the budgeting for it is just to bring it from part-time, 19 hours a week, to the full-time. So that was the addition to the budget. It was just that half.
I guess my question would be, and not to fence with you, but if you were a less than responsible director and decided in mid-year that you wanted to add 5 new librarians under your authority, or just 5 new positions, then it would just be, then the only time that we would see it would be when it's time to make the adjustment to the budget, either in the mid-year or as we discussed the budget for the new fiscal year. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. Nicole?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, typically we don't do anything without informing the board. You know, Nikki would propose it in a director's report or something of that nature before anything was done like that. This budget does actually include replacement of a potential library clerk position. That is the one that was vacated today, and additionally a full-time library assistant. So we have budgeted for both possibilities, but our intention right now is for the full-time library assistant.
Right. I guess my question is more kind of a fundamental question. I've seen scenarios where there is enough revenue coming in, yet positions were added, and now all of a sudden, okay, now we've got to dip into reserves, and that's not the scenario here. And this is like let's make sure that we've got the bumper rails in place so that if something were to happen, we wouldn't have that scenario that I just spelled out. So I'm just thinking out loud. It's an interesting the way it's structured. Camila, you had your hand up. You had some questions on this?
As you were talking, I just had a curious question. So the differences in the fiscal years, this one is the proposed budget, column B. Is that, like, how do you come to that? Is that something, that number, is it closer to what, like pre-pandemic? Or is it just based on the number of positions that you would need to, like, you need to add a new position or replace a position? I'm just curious how you get to this number, the 1,246,200. If it is based on last year, or the years before when there was not a pandemic, versus now.
To answer your question, Trustee, we put together a very detailed salary schedule. So we actually list out, and Nicole fires it up, and we list out each position, including the new position that we're discussing now. At the current wages, we factor in, whatever COLA scenario we're suggesting here, it's 2%. And we have a detailed schedule of how we get to things like wages, the taxes that they're going to be paid on those wages, as well as medical, other insurance, and then the CalPERS retirement.
So the reason why I asked that question is, kind of maybe thinking about Rushmore's question too, is that there wouldn't be a situation where, I don't know. So I'm thinking that is it enough to cover any like added, like for some reason mid-year, Nikki does need to hire like 4 people because as we, recuperate from this pandemic, maybe things start bustling in the library, and is there enough to cover that? Or would we need to have like another budget meeting mid-year, or, at some point to allot for that changes in staff?
Nikki?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It does. That's a good question.
Another thing I thought of was typically we fill based on vacancies. So if we're changing a line item by more than 10,000, that's something that we would need to take to the board. So again, if it's like a massive increase to a position, that would be something that would affect the line item. So again, I think that's how the oversight happens. It's not like I can just decide to increase salaried or hourly budgeting for staff without getting permission from the board first.
Right,
That's
which would include the addition of new position authorities, because
Right.
you have a need. But if that collective increase of just one person is going to then have an impact of greater than 10% of the budget or the line item for salaries, then
Right.
although, honestly, it could be done. If it's 10%, it's $82,000. It'd be for salary to be $82,000 position or less.
Right. But I mean, I think for something like that to happen, it would be like, we're going to take a part-time position and make them a manager. But that's not
Right.
something that I get your point, like having the oversight function, but would not do that without running that by the board first, of course.
Yeah, I just don't want to get in I'm not here to get in your business more than just,
No.
just general understand this, but it's, again, you and your team are very responsible and professional. And again, my concern would be is that someone just decide that they need to add positions, and now we're kind of in a position now that you've already maybe filled them for the fiscal year, filled them now, and you're putting in a budget package for next fiscal year. And your budget has to accommodate these new positions. And so really it's just, I guess it's okay as long as it's, as long as we're acknowledging that there's additional positions that need to be funded and there's sufficient revenue to be able to cover it. That's really the bottom line. That's just more of a comment than not necessary response necessary, but just a general statement. So, okay. Thanks, Nicole. Please continue.
Sure. Okay, so that's salaried and hourly. So payroll taxes have been increased accordingly. Health insurance does accommodate the full-time librarian that we hired, and then the potential of the full-time benefited assistant that we hired, as well as increases to rates and the anticipation of the $100 flexible spending account that we want to provide to all currently enrolled active staff. That would be effective January 1st of 2022. Retirees does increase a little bit. We're anticipating, again, the rates to increase. We also had one additional person retire added to the role. Other insurance rates go up, just anticipating increases across the board there. Workers' comp, we don't have our final invoice. Once we do receive that from SDRMA, that number will be adjusted as well. Let's see. And then retirement also increases accordingly. We did have a couple of new hires this past fiscal year that fell into the classic tier, which doesn't often happen. Generally, new hires always fall into the pepper tier, but I did have those 2 employees, so we had to increase that line item.
Nicole, before you go on, I'd like to go up just for a minute. Life insurance that's afforded to all active or current employees, and they pay a portion of that, and that's the library's share, or what does that represent?
That's a good question. So we offer it to all staff who work 30 or more hours per week. So, and actually that's all that it costs, and the library covers the entire cost of it.
Oh, okay. All right. And but just out of curiosity, what is a payout for that?
It's $15,000 for both standard life insurance and then AD&D.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And if you would just briefly for Camila and myself and whoever may be watching, just a quick explanation of the classic versus the PEPRA CalPERS classification or categories.
Sure. So classic applies to anyone who was in the CalPERS system prior to 2013. So that tier, the employer contribution is a little bit higher than it is for the PEPRA tier. I think it's something like 10 and 7.25%, something like that. So it's a little more for the district to cover the classic members than it is for the PEPRA members, but anybody hired after 2013 into the CalPERS system falls into the PEPRA tier.
Okay. Thank you.
And then our PERS unfunded, I believe that number came from the actuaries or our CalPERS reports, Ian?
That's correct. Yeah, every year we get evaluation from CalPERS to cover our unfunded liability, which is future pension costs. So we get new numbers. I think the last measurement date for this is 2019. It's usually a couple years behind. So that's coming from there, and that is our required minimum payment.
So for monies that we have in reserves, I mean, I guess we can talk about that later on. We are going to have reserves, but you know, part of what predicates what your unfunded contribution is also predicated on what kind of rate of return you're getting on your reserves. So I'm assuming we factor in some rate of return on our reserves that would help offset some of the unfunded liability.
Well, we are actually a part of a risk pool with CalPERS. So all the public agencies enrolled in CalPERS actually share the same, you know, when CalPERS investments do well, everybody does well. When they do bad, everybody does bad. So it's based on your share of investments in the pool and also your share of liabilities in the pool.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, sorry, Camila, this is still a learning process for me for the library district.
I mean, on that note, I'll just quickly mention, we are recommending to a lot of our clients to get a 115 trust set up at some point, whether you start it up and fund it with $25,000 and just, you know, it's something to think forward for the future, but that is a separate investment avenue that would get you a better return than, say, something on LAIF or the funds that you have in the county. And it is an irrevocable trust, but you can always pull the money out for actual pension costs. So it's almost like a rainy day fund as well. We can maybe talk about that another time if the board was interested.
I think it'd be worth exploring. I mean, this isn't a significant amount, but you know, unfunded pension liabilities is a bugaboo across the country. So, and if anything we can do to position ourselves to alleviate any type of liability, the better.
Sure.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, so that brings us to OPEB contribution, which we have not budgeted for next fiscal year. That's our contribution to the OPEB trust for that other post-employment benefit. So we've had some recent discussions about potential options moving forward for OPEB. And after speaking at length with our actuaries, we've decided it's going to take much further study. So what we'd like to do is do a lot more research on it, explore potential options, things like that. We're fairly well funded with the trust at this point in time. So there's no real urgent need to keep contributing to it. Those funds can only be applied to those OPEB payments. So we've decided not to contribute this fiscal year, and we're not going to contribute next fiscal year while we reassess and explore our options for providing that benefit. Okay, so next we'll go to operating expenses. So let's see, recruitment remains the same. Advertising and marketing did increase a little bit for anticipated increase in marketing materials for the mobile library unit. Let's see, payroll fees were increased based on our new service with paychecks for payroll. County tax collection fees did go up a little bit based on an anticipated increase in the county income that we will receive. And then as for insurance, these are really just placeholders. Our broker did reach out to me about the insurance quote. She's going out to carriers to get figures. So as soon as I have that number, that will be updated for earthquake insurance. And then we're also waiting on SDRMA to provide a current actual figure for our general property liability insurance. So those figures will be updated as soon as we have them.
By the way, I'm sorry, on just for my notification, as far as our two structures, what's the status of their earthquake retrofit status? Are they up to code? And are some of the upgrades we're talking about through Measure Z addressing retrofitting?
Yeah, one of the first things that we're probably going to do is a Tier 3 study of the main library. I don't believe that there's concerns about the Bob Lucas branch. I mean, again, as we hire architects, we'll look into that, but that's going to be one of the first things that we study before we even move into hiring architects and design phase. We did a Tier 1 last year with the architectural and design review, which suggested that we do the Tier 3. So we'll be able to answer that question after that is done, basically.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nikki.
Okay, so for staff costs and professional development, all accounts in this section have been increased in anticipation of expanded in-person training opportunities and the necessary travel for that next fiscal year. And then as for utilities, most accounts in this section were also increased in anticipation of being able to hold open hours on Sundays.
By the way, on the employee or staff recognition, any thoughts about what you'd like to do? And I think that's a great idea. I love the fact that you're pumping more money into the staff, and they've done a great job during COVID, and there's certainly recognition is warranted. Any thoughts on what you'd like to do with this money?
We do things for staff throughout the year. So that does include any milestone awards that we have for the upcoming year. So each time staff has achieved the 5, 10, 15-year milestone, they do receive a small financial gift from the district. So it does include that. It also includes professional development days that we do. Usually it's a dual component of some sort of professional development, but then half the day is usually something a lot more fun for staff to do. So it's in anticipation of that as well. And then we do various things throughout the years. It's been difficult to hold potlucks and things like that of that nature, this year. But we're hopeful that next year we can get back to doing more in-person events. We usually do like a staff bowling night, things like that. So we're hopeful that the next fiscal year we'll be able to keep doing things like that.
That's great.
I was also curious about the trustee professional development. Is that more now because we have new folks, or is that for like the conferences or the classes? Like, for example, did we have to pay for the sexual harassment training or the what is not law and ethics, the trainings that we had to take online? Is that where that comes from?
The ethics and the harassment prevention training are covered by CSDA. So any member of CSDA doesn't have to pay for those trainings. It is more for conferences and things like that you are eligible to attend through CSDA. I think there's a special district leadership one, Nikki.
Yeah, especially for, like you mentioned, Camila, the newer trustees. I attended Special District Leadership Academy virtually last year. I think it would be really beneficial for the new trustees. But again, hopefully it could happen in person, but maybe it could potentially still happen virtually. But either way, I think it cost me $300 or $400 online. But if you go in person, it is more. So yeah, we'll see. We definitely want to support whatever the trustees feel like they need to develop throughout the year.
Okay, right. So then any other operating expenses in this section have been adjusted based on actual or anticipated spending. Membership dues remains about the same. Most of the accounts remain about the same in this category. All right, and then we move on to professional and technical. So for audit and financial consulting, we've kind of shifted this around a little bit. It's an overall decrease, but we have added that $15,000 in anticipation of financial consulting related to the CFD. Legal fees remains the same. And then for consulting other, we've also decreased that. Again, we are spending a lot on consulting in other areas. So we've separated that out related to the CFD, and we'll see that when we move a little further down in the budget.
So Nicole, I didn't look at the prior years, but I should have asked this question. I should have looked previously, but the $205,000 for the current fiscal year, obviously there was a lot of consultants that we worked with in preparation for Z and getting ready for this. So I'm kind of curious as to typically what is the annual consultant line item? Is it typically $70,000, or is it typically like $30,000 to $40,000?
Yeah, it's typically a lot less than that. It was a lot higher last fiscal year with all the consulting we did related to the measure.
Yeah, I kind of figured as much. So, okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
But we will point out that our legal fees continue to drop and drop. A couple of years ago, they were much, much higher. So
very good. I always like to see that.
Okay, great. So then moving on to information technology. So for this technology consulting line, we have requested $17,000 for this account. This we feel is a very necessary expense. It's to hire on a consulting firm, speaking of consultants, to provide as needed IT consulting work when our IT manager is not available, because currently it's really difficult for him to take time off. He's a one-man IT wonder, but we would very much like him to be able to take time off as needed. And if he ever needs a sick day or anything like that, it would be really beneficial for the district to have someone on call that could provide those services to us. So it may not be that amount is required, depending on how often they need to come to the district to provide services, but that was the estimate that Christopher provided for that service.
That's a good idea. And will that be procured just by under Nikki's authority, or is that something that has to go before the full board? I'm assuming you have the authority, Nikki. Do you not for that?
Yeah, I believe Christopher's identified actually a local resident. Is that right, Nicole? Someone that's volunteered with us in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That has a strong IT background that Christopher will train and work closely with, and then just work on an hourly basis.
Okay, so a personal professional contract of some kind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Camila?
Nicole and Nikki, is he really a one person show? Or I mean, he doesn't have an assistant or anything like that? And would it make more sense for him to have an assistant versus using a consultant? Or is it better financially to have a consultant versus another staff person?
It is less costly to have a consultant instead of a staff person. We did talk about it, definitely. It's a little difficult with a part-time staff person. They still need to be scheduled regularly, and they might not necessarily be needed. So it makes a little more sense for Christopher to have someone who's on call who will only come when needed, rather than having a staff person on site 19 hours a week.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I'm Christopher's backup, so if that doesn't tell you this isn't a good thing. I know how to plug in, unplug, and maybe some other small
And turn on and off.
Yeah.
That's also the extent of my ability.
Yeah,
he's a wonder, honestly.
hit the reset button. That's always the first option.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And then technology equipment was increased by $10,000 to replace end-of-life public 3D printers, to purchase new filament for those printers, and to purchase new public laptops. And then technology maintenance fees was increased by $6,500 for additional mobile hotspot service. So in addition to the units themselves, we do have to purchase service for those units. So that's why that account was increased. All right, and then we move on to library materials. So the account cataloging expenses has been eliminated due to a restructuring of our contracts and service with two of our primary vendors, OCLC and Baker and Taylor. So Baker and Taylor is now able to provide us items that have the catalog record already built in, so we no longer need to use OCLC for that service. It was a tremendous savings for the district. Electronic databases and subscriptions, the department recently went through and really took a hard look at what was being used and what wasn't, and we did eliminate a few of our databases, so that line has been decreased. Books,
I
audio.
was just going to say really quickly, I don't think I quite realized that under the electronic databases, I tried to check out a book on Overdrive the other day, and it was like, the Altadena Library no longer has a subscription with us. And I was like, oh man, I know you have the cloud library is there and has a lot of titles. But yeah, I don't think I quite realized that it was going to be gone.
Yeah, no, I'm so sorry about that. If you need to use Overdrive, you can get an LA County card. That's what I do. But it didn't make sense for us to have it. It's a really expensive platform fee to use Overdrive. And it really was not cost effective for us. Cloud Library is way cheaper and has way more content. So we're very happy with Cloud Library. But yeah, I do recommend LA County.
I am probably one of the people in the world that has more library cards than credit cards in my wallet. So I do have an LA County card.
Perfect.
Yeah. And trust me, their catalog is about, 150,000 volumes. Ours was 3,800, which we were able to transfer most over to Cloud Library when we did.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm glad to hear you're using the databases though, Camila.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Okay, so let's see. Books, audio CDs, DVDs, and video games and periodicals have all been decreased. Again, the department took a really hard look at what was being checked out and what wasn't. There is an increased demand for e-content. Just speaking of, cloud library and all of those services, we've seen a tremendous uptick in the use of the electronic resources. So more funds have been allocated to downloadables. As well as to our library of things. I'm sure you've seen in the many reports we're putting together hiking backpacks that you can check out. The telescope is very popular. It gets checked out a lot. So we want to create a more robust library of things for our patrons. We've also added 2 new accounts. Mobile library collection is going to be used for the purchase of materials exclusive to the mobile library. And then purchase suggestions is something that we already do, but the department asks that we add a separate line item for that. So these are suggestions that patrons can make for the library to purchase for our collection. So that's what's been budgeted for that account. Any questions on materials? Okay, perfect. So we'll move on to facilities. So in conjunction with Jonathan, the facilities manager, these accounts have been adjusted based on actual and anticipated spending. They're fairly close to what he spent last year. And then we move on to programming. So every account in this section has seen an increase due to an anticipation of further reopening. Next fiscal year, they're already planning a lot of outdoor socially distanced programming. So all of these accounts have been increased for that reason. And then trustee election, not an expense for us this year. Capital expenditures, we have put aside a little money here to address any emergencies before the bonds are cashed, and we have those proceeds. And then CFC bond expenses, we worked with Cindy and Ian on these. So this is what we anticipate spending on bond issuance consulting, which includes municipal advising, bond underwriter, things of that nature. CFD administration will be just like what the parcel tax administrators currently do for us. They prepare the tax roll, they take care of all of that for us. CFD banking fees, we are required to keep the bond revenue in a separate trust in a separate bank and make payments through them. So that is an additional vendor that we'll need. And then CFD project management, we've already signed on with Rockland. So that's an anticipated, I believe we said that was the first 6 months, Ian?
Yeah, that's going to be the first 6 months. Again, it's an estimate, but 4% on 24 million for 6 months.
So that would be the maximum. If we were to bond out the full
Exactly.
24 million, that would be the most that we would owe. And again, these are all expenses that we anticipate will be reimbursed to the district through the bonds once they are cashed. So that does give us an overall addition at this time of about 33,000 to our reserve account. And again, we've had to prepay all of these CFD expenses, so those would be reimbursed as well out of the bond revenue.
So the actual revenue that we anticipate is the 42, 46. Okay, 4.246300. What is the total expenses then for this projected fiscal year?
I believe
It's the same amount.
Yeah.
The revenues, when you look at them, if you go back to the top, you can look and see that.
Yeah, I saw that dollar amount there.
So you see at the top, but if you go straight to the top, you can see that there's a projected use or additions of reserves. And so it's not technically a revenue. If you got rid of that line item, you would see at the bottom, we would have net income of $33,127. So
Got
we're
it.
just trying to, so it's not coming from the outside, but it's what we get to add to.
Got it. Yeah, I see that now. I'd never seen it represented that way, but that makes sense. And then our overall reserves then are then that when we add that, then our reserves at 3,488,127. Okay, which is very healthy.
Yes, and a
And
lot
we're-
better than pulling. We thought we were gonna have to pull 190,000 last year, I think. So this is much, much better.
Yeah, overall, the performance in 2021 was favorable. So we're in
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah,
better
this is-
position than we were last year.
This is very healthy. And then as far as, a couple of meetings back, we were looking at the 10-year trajectory. Obviously, looking at the tail end of that 10-year period, that we're getting it close to that tipping point where we could be upside down. So this having the reserves in place now and being fiscally prudent makes perfect sense right now. And the nice thing is you also have in this budget staff and resources for the mobile vehicle as well. So you're addressing both, which is excellent. And I want to thank you for this hard work, putting this budget together. Very fiscally conservative, but at the same time addresses the overall needs of the community and the library. I think that how you've reallocated the monies for the services and increase that budget there is excellent. And of course for the staff as well. I think it's coming out of COVID, this is an excellent budget. Camila, any other thoughts overall on the budget, what we have here?
No, I would agree with that. I feel like you all made this very easy for us, made my job on this committee very easy. So I appreciate that.
Definitely. So there was Nicole, there was a cost by department, which that's not part of what the action item is though, is it? Or is this part of your, oh, it is, keep going.
Sure, yeah. No, that's okay. So this was something that we had kind of discussed with the budget committee, was kind of seeing a breakdown and allocation of staff time and costs. So this is something that Ian and I worked on together. So it's broken out by department. This breaks down personnel costs by department, and then we also have hours by department. So just kind of where the time is going. So Nikki and I are planning to kind of delve into this a lot more and see, exactly where staff are spending the majority of their time on desk or on programming out in the community, things like that, as we further reopen and kind of assess our service model and see how it's going.
Yeah, I think that's great. And obviously things are going to change as we roll out and open up the doors full time. And it's really helpful to have these two gauges to kind of figure out what we're spending our money on and our time. This so I really do appreciate you putting this together, and I think that it'd be helpful to maybe have this on the district website as well, just so people understand how well the library is run and how those resources are being allocated. So I mean, it's something you should be proud of, to be able to show anyone how you're allocating your limited resources to provide such great services.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that is the end of your presentation. Is that right? For this item? Great. I have no further questions on the proposed budget. Do you, Camila?
I do not know. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to move to approve it as proposed?
I do move to approve the
As
budget
do
as
I.
proposed.
So that's 2 aye votes for the proposed budget for fiscal year 21-22. Thank you very much. Well done. Really appreciate the hard work that went into that. And Cindy and Ian, thank you very much for your support on that as well.
Most welcome.
Okay, let's go to the next item, which is B, review and approval of budget committee meeting schedule for fiscal year 21-22. So
I'm gonna bug out, guys, if that's all
okay,
right.
Cindy.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
See you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, Cindy. Yeah, and if you guys don't need me on either, I can sign off as well.
Okay. No, I think we're good.
Thank you, Ian.
Okay.
Thank you, Ian.
Good to
Thank
see
you. Y'all have a great night.
You too.
All right, so our next item is a budget committee meeting schedule. So as both of you know, Diego started with us about 2.5 months ago, and he is combing through the policies and procedures and wants to make sure we are doing everything far, far above board. So we did not have a formal schedule for this budget committee. And according to the board policies, we should. So we did put together a schedule for fiscal year 21-22. And we could look at doing that calendar year come 21, because I do know that's when the committees are appointed. But for right now, we thought it'd be good to get the next year's worth on the books. Again, if we hit August 12th and we feel like there's not a lot to discuss, we have the option to cancel. But we do think it'd be good to have these on the calendar. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Diego, but they're on Thursdays at 3 o'clock.
That's correct. It'll be Thursdays, 3 o'clock, every quarter.
Yeah. So we're recommending you review and approve the calendar. And again, we'll continue to keep an eye on it, but it probably wouldn't hurt for us to meet quarterly just to review where we're at with things too.
Great. Camila, any thoughts or comments, concerns?
Yes. So I totally agree, and I would be fine with meeting every quarter, but sorry, someone's at my door. Who is that? Sorry. Okay. The first 2 dates might be a challenge. So I wanted to know if we're wedded to these dates, because I may be out of town or out of range. We're supposed to be camping on the 12th, and then have some plans potentially on November 11th and 12th also. So is it, and I'm not sure if I'll have.
Yeah, I think November 11th is Veterans Day.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't think that's good. So would you be available the Thursday before or after in August, Camila?
I'm gonna check the calendar right now. We gotta pull up.
You are awfully organized, already knowing 6 months out.
Well, I planned like 3 camping trips this summer just because we haven't been able to go any places. And my birthday is actually November 12th. And so I figured like I'm planning these things to do because we've been trapped for so long.
Yeah, totally understand.
Well, more importantly, we want to know where you're camping.
And that one's going to be a fun one. We're going to go to the beach. It's going to be a beach camping.
Oh,
in August. We're going camping this weekend, and then again in June. Okay, where is my calendar? Okay, there it is. All right, so we're talking about August the 12th minus 7 is 5.
Yes. Or 19, right?
Oh, you know what? We're back on August 12th, actually. Oh, that's why I have it marked. It's the first day of kindergarten.
Oh, yeah, that probably won't work.
Yeah, I'm not because I don't know what's gonna happen right now. Sorry. But the 19th is open during that time, as is the 5th. The time now that works, but it's 3 o'clock, which is around the time that school like gets out. And I don't know at this moment like what the plans are for, school and, where he's going to be, if there's an after school program, if they're going to be in person and all that. So 3 o'clock might be a little bit challenging. Just
would later or earlier work for you, Camila? What makes?
Yeah, I think earlier is working, because then he would be at school and I wouldn't have to worry about him. Hopefully they'll be at school.
Like
praying.
a 1
o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, sure.
I can make that work. And do you want to move it obviously because November 11th is a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
What about we just shifted all of these up 1 week? So the first Thursday of the month, do we have anything, Nikki, on our respective calendars that business that would prevent us doing 1
Typically,
o'clock?
typically the first weeks are good because we're just through the board meeting, quite honestly. And
Okay.
actually, that's not a bad idea because that gives us more time to get the report ready for the board meeting as well. So if
Right.
the first week works for both of you, we could shift.
And make it 1 o'clock. So August 5th,
Yeah.
November, what, 4th?
Yeah. And you know what? I'm actually half tempted to eliminate the 22 dates because it could be a completely different committee. So maybe we should just agree to these 2 meeting dates for the rest of this calendar year. And then at the beginning of 22, we'll put together a calendar with the new budget committee.
Okay.
How,
I'm
how
fine with
often, when do they change, Nikki?
So in December, we elect the new president and secretary, and the president appoints people to the committees.
Oh, so
I mean,
that
you could
happens
volunteer.
once a year. It just doesn't
Yeah.
stay how it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Oh,
could
okay.
volunteer to do it again, but typically they
Sure.
change from year to year.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
don't think, I mean, but I think to Diego's point, we could put this on the calendar. I mean, we could adopt all 4 dates, and whoever is the new chair can say, hey, this doesn't work for
Right.
me and and the other trustees, so we need to alter it, which is fine. But I think that in the spirit of what was proposed, that we should be honoring our bylaws, we should have 4 dates, and that these can always be modified, just like we're modifying it right now by creating this on the fly.
Okay.
So,
Do we
I
want
would suggest we just keep on I would suggest the first, I would suggest the first Friday, every quarter at 1 o'clock, and and even in February and May of next year, and we've got all 4 dates, and then we can can always change it.
okay.
Friday or
So-
Thursday?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay, so February 3rd, and then it would be May 5th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
And that way, then if those dates, that date and time work for everyone, then that's one less thing you have to do. That's where we're going.
Exactly. Okay.
Okay.
All right, good. So then if I could get a motion then to approve standing meetings for this fiscal year 21-22 for August 5th, November 4th, February 3rd, and May 5th,
So moved.
all at 1 o'clock, Thursday, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so that's a yes. That's 2 yes votes, so that item's approved. Thank you very much for working through that. And then the last item on the agenda is a review of the adopted fiscal year 21-22 budget for the Local Agency Formation Commission of the County of Los Angeles, LAFCO.
Diego, you want to take this one?
Sure, I'm gonna really paraphrase what is in the report, but recently we got an email from LAFCO, the executive officer, Paul Novak, regarding the budget, and it's, as we mentioned in the report, it's kind of pursuant to the government code that they need to provide a copy of their budget to all their constituents. So in essence, their special districts and whoever they support. He did note that that in this, there wasn't really an increase between one last year and the following year. So fiscal year 2021 for special districts, but that there might be increases in the fiscal year 2021-2022, depending on their assessments, but that will be something that gets accounted for in the following fiscal year budget. And then again, this was an informational item, something that we normally also present to the board just so that they're aware of. And it usually comes into our government liaison duties, just letting you all know about this. There's not really an action for us, it's just more so that we are aware of what's going on with LAFCO.
Can you?
Diego, go ahead, Camila. Go ahead.
I was just
Camila.
curious, I'm not familiar with LAFCO. Can you give a little bit of information in terms of what that is? And so that I understand you, they are required, because they are a special district, they're required to share their budget with their constituents. So this is them telling us, here's our budget for the next fiscal year. Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
Yes, except they're not necessarily a special district. They are a commission that supports the formation of local agencies within the county of LA. There's multiple LAFCO divisions or jurisdictions, but yeah, they're a commission that supports the local agency formation. So that could be special districts, that could be cities, local governments, anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
But there's no fiscal impact.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah,
no,
it's
sorry.
just informational.
Yeah, and we did have a presentation from Paul Novak, wasn't it, Nicole? It was in person, so it was pre-pandemic, and I was here. So I would guess it was in like November, December, January of last year that like, I'll find the link and I'll send it to you guys because he kind of gave an overview of what LAFCO is. And I'll just provide you that link if you want to watch it in the board meeting.
It'd be helpful. I mean, I'm aware of LAFCO. I just never really got to know their budget of any, it didn't really matter to me, but now that's being presented makes me wonder if I should know about it or not. And we do a portion of what well, is there any of our budget at all from the library that pays for LAFCO at all? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Let me double check on that. No, the last time we paid them was in 2011 for an organizational membership. So we're not currently.
Oh, but it's the membership. We're not, as a special district, we're not contributing, 0.5% of our budget to support LAFCO. This is just informational, but for some reason we have to know about it.
We receive their budget every year. So to kind of answer Camila's question, LAFCO is a commission that gets to determine who is eligible to be a special district and who is not. So they determine our boundary, and if for any reason we're to become insolvent or anything like that, they would have the authority to strip us of being a special district.
It's just interesting that they're sharing their budget with us. So I don't understand why, but okay. Okay, so Diego, you don't need an act. This is just for information, right? There's no action necessary on our part.
I'm curious who. So they have to do this for everyone? Approximately. I mean, just curious. Like, how many other constituents do they have to do this for? And is this something that's like required in their? I don't know if they have bylaws or what.
I'm looking right now for when that presentation happened, because now I'm curious to look at it again too.
They do have their own set of bylaws and everything. I want to say it was between like 1 and 200 agencies that they work with.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, it was done in person, wasn't it, Nicole? I'm thinking of that correctly, right?
Yeah, it was quite a while ago. He came and did a PowerPoint presentation.
I could swear. It was
LAFCO got heavily involved many years ago with certain portions of the city of Los Angeles were trying to secede from the city of LA. So LAFCO was in the center of all of the legal disputes, and got to see them up close and personal, how they operate. It was kind of fascinating. So, okay. Camila, do you have any other questions? Questions or comments on this item, Camila?
No, I
okay.
don't.
Great, thank you. Diego, thank you very much for that presentation. And so with that concludes the new business, and now it's proposed future agenda items. And Camila, if you have any thoughts for agenda items next, just email Nikki or myself. And with that, you're good to go to adjourn, Camila?
Oh, mute. I am, yes.
Yes, okay, great. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Diego, Nicole, Nikki, thank you very much for the great work in this budget for next fiscal year. Fiscally sound, but yet providing great services and support for your staff. So job well done. Thank you very much.
Good job. Thank you.
Okay, be well. Have a